The play on the field, the court, and the ice is just one part of sports. Behind every game are the people hard at work so we can enjoy the action. They're the owners, administrators, agents, broadcasters, and vendors who bring the games to life. Meet them when you go behind the game with Patrick Klinger and Dave Boden.
Welcome to Behind the Game. I'm Patrick Klinger, president of Agile Marketing Partners. Alongside me, a man still gloating over the fact that Paul Bunyan's axe is returned to his alma mater, the president and CEO of Highway Credit Union, soon to be Blaze Credit Union.
That's right.
Dave Boden.
Thank you, Patrick.
Dave, I hope you and your family had a great Thanksgiving.
We did. I hope you
Fantastic.
as well, and everybody, and go Badgers is kind of all I can say right now. So I'll switch from that. Let me introduce our great guest this week. Audra Martin is here to join us, and as many of you know, Audra's been a member of Bally Sports North broadcast team since 2015, studio host now for the Minnesota Wild, and sideline reporter for the Minnesota Twins. You were two-sport athlete in your native Chicago, also a broadcast journalism major at University of Central Florida, and best of all, an Emmy winner. So welcome, Audra.
You're saying go Badgers, go Knights. Woo, UCF.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I know where the Badgers can go, but...
Yeah, okay. So, Audra, you're a Chicago native. You grew up as a passionate fan of the Cubs. You've been a fixture here on Minnesota sports now since 2015. But you're a lifelong Cub fan, and now you're here. So are you still a fan of the Chicago team, still follow them, or has your allegiance really shifted here to Minnesota franchises now that you've been here a decade?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. This is fun. Usually I'm interviewing you.
That's right.
So it's kind of nice to be on this side of things.
It is kind of cool.
But yeah, to answer your question, no, I have completely become invested in Minnesota sports. I wasn't a huge sports fan when I was younger because nobody in my family really liked sports, which we always joke around, like, where did I come from? Like, I love sports, played sports. My grandmother was a big Cubs fan, so she was the one that got me into baseball because I would come home from school and she'd be watching the games. And so I give her a lot of credit. Those are some of my favorite memories, watching games with her. But nobody else in my family was into sports at all. So I really only watched, initially started watching basketball and hockey games because I had a TV in my bedroom. And when my sister would come in and try to watch TV and I wanted her to leave, I would put on a sporting event and that would get her out of the room. And so that was how I first I really watched my first ever NHL game. And we didn't go to games growing up and stuff like that. But yeah, I always played sports, enjoyed watching them, but I was never super attached to Chicago sports except for the Cubs. I did cry when they finally won the World Series. Yeah. But yeah, now I am all about Minnesota.
Audra, despite its Minnesota nice reputation, our state can also be a little bit challenging for outsiders. Did you have any challenges establishing yourself and ingratiating yourself with the teams and the fans here in Minnesota?
You know, not a ton. It was a little nerve-wracking, right? Because I didn't know a ton of people here in the city. I was a little nervous about the winters. It had been a while because I went to college in Florida, and then I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and Huntsville, Alabama, and Nashville, Tennessee. So it had been a while since I'd been around the snow and the icy conditions. So that was a little bit of an adjustment. But in terms of the city, I did ask around for people that I knew that had lived here at some point, or asked about the teams, and I kept hearing wonderful things about the organizations that I was going to cover. So that was great. The one thing I will say, I do remember people told me that, yes, there's like Minnesota nice, but one thing that's interesting about Minnesotans is a lot of people stay here. You would think that people would want to, get out of town and go somewhere warm, but a lot of people stay here. So people are friends still with their friends from high school and college. So I was told that it's kind of hard to make friends because everybody already has their group. You got to kind of like force your way into a group. I did notice that initially at first, but so my group of friends were all from outside of Minnesota. We kind of found each other, which was nice, but everybody here really is nice. So it wasn't that difficult. It was a unique position for me to be in because I have moved around so much and I've had to make so many different groups of friends to meet people who are still extremely close with their high school and college friends. And but I think that's great. And everything else about the city I love. It was honestly a pretty easy transition, and I hope I get to stick around for a while.
I think you could officially be one of us now.
Yeah.
So
Thank
congratulations.
you. I know.
Congratulations.
When people would say like, "Oh, she's one of us," or "He's one of us," I'm like, "How do I get to become one of us?" Like, so thank you.
So you mentioned a couple of the places you lived. So kind of what led you from being a two-sport high school athlete? You went to University of Central Florida. Started in criminal justice, actually. Then studio host and sports sideline reporter in Minnesota. Must have been a little bit of a long and winding journey to get here.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey because I didn't go to college initially as a broadcast major. Every college that I applied to, I was a criminal justice major. My whole life growing up, I wanted to be a police officer, which I think made my dad probably pretty nervous, but I was that girl. I would do ride-alongs with our town's police department, and for some reason, I just wanted to be a police officer, wanted to help people. And then once I got to college, the UCF has a system where they have these restricted majors, where if you get a certain GPA, they will invite you to apply for these restricted majors. And I ended up doing very well my first year of college, and got a letter from the television broadcasting program, and it just kind of sparked an interest. I was like, well, I was always into performing in theater and stuff when I was little. Maybe this is something I can explore. And so I called my parents and asked if I could add another major and still do criminal justice, but also do television, and they were all for it. And so I quickly got hooked on the idea. But still back then, there weren't a ton of female sports reporters. Erin Andrews was really kind of just breaking out onto the scene then. But you looked at, Pam Oliver and Michelle Tafoya, they were legends, but so few and far between. So it was kind of an intimidating thought about trying to break into that. And so my first job out of college, I actually worked in the front office of the Atlanta Braves because I was intimidated and I wasn't really sure I wanted to move to a small town to start the whole journey of being a sports broadcaster. I was there for a couple months, and then I realized, I was like, oh man, I really should have pursued this because I missed it, and I missed the drive and the dream. And so it took me a while to get back into it, but finally got my first job full-time, which was in Huntsville, Alabama. Of all places, never thought I would end up in Huntsville, but it was a blessing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You also had a job as an audience coordinator for Family Feud.
Yep.
Hosted by comedian Steve Harvey.
Yep.
And I understand that some of Steve's advice really had a major impact on you and your career.
Huge impact. I say this a lot. Steve Harvey changed my life with one simple conversation. He was speaking to the audience during one of the commercial breaks, and somebody asked him, what's the best advice that you have gotten or that you give? And he said that he believes that you should never have plan B. That everyone thinks it's smart to have something to fall back on. He goes, I think that's the worst thing that you can do, because if you have a plan B, you're basically subconsciously telling yourself it's okay to fall back on something and settle for something less than your dream. So you should have plan A, and you go for plan A 110%. And when you know that you've exhausted it, then you make another plan A. And I was sitting backstage, had my headset and my walkie-talkie on, and I beeped my crew, and I was just like, oh, darn. And they're like, what? I was like, I feel like he's talking to me. And I went home that night, I wrote him a letter to let him know that those words had an impact on me. And the next day I go to work and I get a beep on my headset, and they're like, Audra, Steve wants to talk to you. And went backstage, waited for him outside of his dressing room, and he came out, he had the note, and he asked me, he's like, okay, so what's the dream? I told him, I'm like, I want to be a sports broadcaster. And long story short, he basically was like, okay, then go after it, because I'm obviously your plan B, and I don't want to be your plan B, so I'll give you one more season, and if you're here after that, I'll fire you, because if I don't, you will never go after it. And I was like, oh my God, he's right. And that night, I went home, updated my resume tape, sent it out to every job that was available in the country, and a couple weeks later, I got that job in Huntsville. So I really do owe Steve a lot. Your parents and your friends and everybody that you know can support you and kind of push you to go after your dreams, but sometimes it's that one chance encounter or conversation that for some reason is the one that really sticks, and that was Steve Harvey for me. So I owe him a lot.
Yeah, that is a great story. So you like to go behind the game to tell stories of what's happening with the teams and in the community beyond what the fans just see on the field. So is there a story or two that you're particularly proud of?
The first one that comes to mind, which I think is a perfect example of what a sideline reporter can do or what they can add to the broadcast, is one of my favorite moments ever. It was a couple years ago when Cruz was here. We were in Detroit, and it was late in the season, so there were a lot of September call-ups and rookies that were now part of the team. And that flight from Detroit to, I forget where we were going next, was the theme dress-up flight. And that theme was football. And so everybody had their favorite team jerseys, and everybody was gonna, because I think they were getting ready to do their fantasy football draft when we landed in the next city. Well, Nelson found out that there were all these rookies and call-ups that didn't know about it, so they didn't have jerseys. And he didn't want anybody to feel left out. And so I noticed him kind of walking around in the clubhouse more so than he normally would on a game day. And then I saw him hand over his credit card to one of the Detroit clubhouse attendants. And I was just like, something's going on. So I approached Dustin Morse with the Twins. I said, what's he up to? And Dustin's like, he told the clubhouse attendant to go to the Dick's Sporting Goods and buy as many football jerseys as he can find because he didn't want anybody to be left out. And so that's why if you look at the picture from that trip, there are a ton of Detroit Lions jerseys in that whole, and then you've got some Vikings ones and, scattered, but tons of Lions jerseys because he didn't want anybody to feel like they weren't part of the team. And so I got to tell that story on the air. And I got so many tweets and messages about that people just loved hearing that. Like, they liked Nelson Cruz for the athlete that he was, but they didn't realize necessarily the leader and the teammate that he was. And that just really kind of showed what he was all about and why he is as respected and admired as a player and a person. So things like that. And I love the stories that we get to do for Hockey Day when we get to share stories about people from all over the state of hockey. We were talking about this before the show. I did a story last year about a young boy named Sebastian who was from Haiti, lived there up until the earthquake, and he became an orphan. He was in an orphanage. Was adopted here by a wonderful family in Minnesota, and he had bilateral clubfoot, so he couldn't walk or skate, but they got him into sled hockey, and he is excelling at sled hockey and doing great and really enjoying it. And so I got to share his story about his adoption and his journey here to the States and falling in love with the game, and those are so great. Those are just, those are things that you wouldn't normally hear about, and for me to be able to share that with sports fans is awesome. The highlights and the home runs and all that's fun too, but the behind the scenes stuff is great.
Yeah, that's what connects with people.
Yeah.
Audra, you've spoken candidly about some of the challenges of being taken seriously by your male colleagues, by male fans, athletes. How do you deal with those kind of situations when a man thinks that a woman can't possibly know as much about sports as he does?
Yeah, it took me a while to be more confident in that and be able to have thick skin and let it just kind of roll off. But I was always told by some of my counterparts or people that I really admire in this industry, you just have to work that much harder. You have to be that much more prepared so that you can prove them wrong. And a lot of people also told me, don't be afraid to ask questions. So if somebody thinks I don't know anything, well, if I don't, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking my male counterparts questions. And I do that a lot with Rocco Baldelli. I'm very comfortable with him, and I can go into his office. I'm like, Rocco, I don't understand this rule, or I don't understand why this move was made. And he is so helpful, more than willing to make sure that I understand really exactly what's going on. So I think the more knowledge and the more preparation and stuff that you can do, that's the easiest way to counter that. But you're never going to win everybody over, right? There's always going to be people who say, just because I didn't play professional sports or I didn't play football, that I am not going to know what I'm talking about. But I think that's laughable, because when you look on national broadcasts, some of the best broadcasters in the country didn't play whatever sport they're talking about either, right? They understand the game, they learn the game, they've worked on their craft. So it took a little bit of while, it took some time to get that confidence and to not let it derail me. But now I kind of look at it as a challenge. If somebody thinks I don't know anything, bring it on, let's talk, and that's always kind of fun.
So talking about some things that have probably been somewhat male dominated until some success stories like yourself. You get to interact with the teams and the players in some special ways. And after the Twins clinched the AL Central title back in September, the star pitcher, Pablo Lopez, poured 2 beers over your head during the locker room celebration while you were live on the air. What were you thinking right then?
I was thinking it's awesome. It's so fun, right? You work so hard. You get to know these guys so well, and you see how hard they work and how much the game and the fan base means to them. So for them to accomplish their goal that they set out to at the beginning of the season, it's fun to be a part of. It's fun to celebrate with them. But I know that I'm not part of the team in that situation, so it's not about me. And I remember that video in particular, that was 2017, and then this is this year. But leading up into those clubhouse celebrations, my producer said, remember, this is not about you. Like, so don't freak out if they do pour beer on you. Just pretend that it's not happening. Move on. Keep going with your questions. And that always stuck out to me. It's hard when those champagne's getting sprayed in your face. It does burn, but it is fun to be a part of. And I chuckled though, because so many people were tweeting me and messaging me and saying, oh, look like you're miserable. You must have hated that. I'm like, how can you hate that? It's so fun to be a part of it. It takes a while to get the beer and the champagne out of your hair and all of that. But it's so worth it. It's so much fun. And it's just awesome to be able to see the guys celebrating the way that they do. If that means that I'm getting beer poured on my head, I'm all for it. And if we could do it every year, I would say let's do it every year. It's fun. It's awesome.
We all like that.
Yeah.
I've been part of a couple of those celebrations when I was in the Twins front office, and it is a blast. And you work so hard to get to that point. You're absolutely right. When the time comes when you won the division, you're moving on. It's great fun.
It's so fun. I love it. I was so happy for the team, and I was so happy for the fans that they were here this year. Finally got to see a postseason win and a series win. It was really cool to see the players go out back onto the field and celebrate with the fans that were still hanging around. Very cool moment for fans here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah. Audra, a few moments ago, you mentioned Michelle Tafoya. She's a Minnesotan. She's had a tremendous career as a sideline reporter in the NFL before she retired a couple of years ago. How important is it for girls and young women who would like to have a career in sports journalism to have examples like you and Michelle?
Oh, I think it's huge. And I will fully admit, when I see Michelle tweeting about twin stuff, I'm like, oh my God, was she watching the game? That means that she was watching me. Did she think I did a good job? Like, she's a legend in this industry, and to know that she potentially is watching some of our broadcasts makes me nervous, because I admire her and I think she has done such a fantastic job. And so, yeah, it is important. Like I said, for me, there weren't as many women in this industry when I was younger. Now I love seeing that there are so many women. I love seeing that there are now a lot of men in baseball that are in the sideline reporting role. I think that's important too. It doesn't always just have to be a female in that role. And now we have women doing play-by-play responsibilities and things like that. So I think it's great that there is that even playing field. And I think for any young person, no matter what career you want to pursue, it is important to see somebody that either looks like you or acts like you or is from where you are. Whatever the case may be, it is very valuable to see somebody else, see that representation. And for young girls, I'm so glad that it is becoming more common and that it's not as crazy to tell people that you want to be a sideline reporter, because that's kind of how it was when I was in college. It was just kind of like, really? That's what you want to do? You want to be like Erin Andrews? I was like, no, I want to be Audra Martin and make it my own. But I don't think that it should be that crazy that that's something that I want to pursue. And so I'm really glad now that these young girls that are growing up are seeing so many women on television talking about sports and hanging right there with the guys in the business too. I think it's great.
I think sometimes there's been a perception that sports broadcasting, sideline reporting, other things may not be, serious journalism, but at heart you are a journalist, and that's the career you're in. You tell stories, and you paint a picture. And a question for you: what fellow sideline reporter Carissa Thompson recently admitted to making up some of her reporting. What did you think as a journalist when you heard those comments?
I was really disappointed, because I like Carissa. I think she does a fantastic job. She's got a great personality. She's done this job for so long, and she's made a really great name for herself. And I've never met her, but I've heard wonderful things about her. And so I was very disappointed, because I knew instantly that was just going to put a shadow and a cloud over that role. It doesn't matter who's doing it. Now there's going to be this question of, wait, did you make that up? I mean, it's journalism 101. You learn that in your first class in college. You don't make anything up. And I just can't fathom making something up. Because I have been in that situation before, where I've asked Rocco a question about something and maybe he didn't give me a ton of info about it. But that's when you go and talk to the players about it. Or so if like our producer tells Dick Bramer to send it down to me, or like, Audra, can you add to this? If I don't have anything to add, I will just say that I don't. And my producer's not going to open my mic, right? I don't say anything. I would never make something up, because I've worked so hard to build those relationships and earn the trust of the players that I cover in the organizations. The last thing I want to do is make something up and put that in jeopardy. So if you don't have anything, you just say you don't have anything. And I know she was talking about those halftime interviews with coaches, which is, I understand a lot of times it's full of cliches. But every once in a while, you get those awesome interviews where a coach gives you a great nugget or goes off about how unhappy he is with his team or whatever it is. But even if it is just a cliche-filled interview, you still go with it. You don't make it up. And so that was really disappointing. And then it was really disappointing to see the comments, like when other reporters, like Michelle, commented on Twitter about it, Tracy Wolfson, a lot of the women that I admire a ton made comments about it on Twitter, and I then clicked on their replies. And there were so many replies from people being like, I don't even know why people are upset. Sideline reporters are pointless. It's stupid. Nobody cares. Like, no, those coaches don't say anything. There's so much more that goes into the role besides those halftime interviews. You know, we're in the production meetings. We're in there with the coaches and the players. We're getting a lot of information. A lot of times what, you know, Dick and Justin or whatever are talking about during a Twins broadcast are questions that I asked Rocco during the media sessions. But I'm not expecting Justin to be like, oh, Audra asked Rocco this question and give me the credit, because it works in my advantage too. Like sometimes it's Justin that asked Rocco a question, but I happen to be doing a story about it, and so I referenced that Rocco said that. And it's a team effort. There's so much more to the role than just those halftime interviews. And so I just was really disappointed that it just put, I don't know, I think a bad taste in people's mouths about really what the role is all about.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when everybody gets painted with that brush when those things happen. Social media probably just amplifies it and makes it worse.
Yeah. Social media is great. It's also the worst. It's
Indeed.
And it has changed our industry tremendously in good ways and bad ways.
Absolutely. Had a huge influence in athletics, no question.
For sure.
You work for Bally Sports North, which is a regional sports network owned by the Diamond Sports Group, which is currently in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future of regional sports networks. Yeah. How concerning is that for you, whose job relies on that?
Very. It's very, right now, I mean, this is one of the more stressful times I've gone through in my career because of the uncertainty. With the contract between Bally and the Twins expiring at the end of this 23 season, I don't know what is ahead for me in terms of baseball, and that's hard. It was so difficult for me to leave after that last game when they lost to Houston. I walked out of the clubhouse, and I was emotional, I'll admit. Like, I ran into Royce Lewis's mom, who I've created a really good relationship with, and we were talking, and she could tell I was like emotional, and I just started crying. I was like, because I don't know if I'm going to be back next year. And that reality was tough because we just don't know. I mean, there is a possibility that a deal with Bally and the Twins will get worked out. There's a possibility that whoever does take over producing the Twins games will want to keep me on board, and then it'll be like nothing changed. We just don't know. They could go in a completely different direction and bring all new people. It's just a waiting game right now, and that is hard because it's going to be here really soon. And so I am very fortunate, though, because I still am going to be with the Wild. Nothing there is changing. And but looking ahead to the summer, because again, I mean, come April, that's not that far off. And for me right now, not knowing if I will have be able to make a living is nerve-wracking. And plus, I love baseball. Like I say this all the time, and I think people think I'm lying. I have my ultimate dream job. People have asked me, and people make comments like, oh, you want to be Aaron Andrews or whatever. I don't. I have always said that I love working for a regional network because you feel like you're part of the community. You feel like you become invested in these organizations. And the bouncing around from different teams and doing the national network stuff is great for some people. It's not what I have always aspired to. This has been what I have aspired to create an identity, be part of a community for a substantial period of time. And for that to be potentially going away it's been hard. It's been a stressful time. I'm hoping that it will all work out, but you just never know. Unfortunately, this business, as you guys both know, changes constantly.
Well, I know we're all hoping everything works out. I mean, for you, but just for all of us.
Appreciate it.
Especially as fans and want to see the games. And it's a challenge these days when, you got to decide which streaming service and which place to find it. And if you got somebody like Bally Sports that's right there pretty much.
It's tough. And I understand people's frustrations with, how things are changing and being where you can watch the games, or if you are able to. That's tough. Because the fans are the ones that are suffering from it. I would want to watch my games too. I totally get it. But again, just like baseball is always changing, it's growing. So is the broadcast side of things. So I mean, I think ultimately it will end up, it'll be okay. It's just this is a whole new ball game, pun totally intended, when it comes to streaming rights and availability and stuff like that. But I think eventually we'll figure it out. We'll get there.
Yeah. So we've talked about journalism and also the way you've built relationships within the community and within the teams. So you report specifically on 2 teams right now, the Twins and the Wild. And you do all those things, but how do you balance the idea between being an objective reporter and being maybe characterized as a homer for the home team? And how do you balance that?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing is just to be fair too. And you can be, because we are a team employee, right? And so I know fans watch and like, you're a team employee, you're not supposed to be negative or whatever. And sometimes it's tough. I mean, my first season here was the year that the Twins lost 103 games. It is tough when you have to go into the clubhouse every day and ask questions about why things are going so poorly. It's tough. But I think most importantly, you just have to be fair. And the easiest way is to let the players tell the story. It's not up to me to give my opinion on why I think they're struggling. Same with the Wild. That's why Kevin Gorg does such a good job with his interviews of talking to the players and the coaches and getting their thoughts about why things were going poorly at the beginning of this season for the Wild. It is tough because, we are a team partner, so we're not going to go out and bash the team. I also wouldn't want that to be my job because these guys work incredibly hard. The coaches work incredibly hard. The organization is invested. Of course, they want to win. So it's not my job to go out and
you see what they're doing.
Yeah, right. And so I can't imagine what it would be like for some of these players who go through these slumps, like Matt Boldy. Finally getting the big goal the other night, I was so happy because we heard Bill Guerin say that was weighing on him like 1,000 bricks. And he's a young player. We know how talented he is. And so for him to go on this little bit of a skid has to be incredibly hard. It's not my job to go out and trash him and say, why haven't you scored in 11 games? So I do enjoy that aspect of being a team partner and being able to feel like in a certain way a little bit part of the community and the team and stuff like that. Like I said, the positive stuff, that's the best part.
Yeah. Hey, we're out of time. That was
already?
Wow. But one little known fact, maybe a couple of little known facts about you, is that you've been playing the violin since you were 2.5, and you sing, and you perform the national anthem before a WNBA game. So are we going to see you perform a national anthem before a Twins game?
You know what? They actually asked me to sing opening day last year, but I couldn't because I was working. And so the timing of the anthem and stuff, they do know, and I've always been on standby. There's been a couple times where there's rain delays, and they have mentioned something. Right. But yeah, I've sang at NBA, WNBA, NHL. I used to be the Thrashers national anthem singer when I worked for them. So I've done it a bunch. I'm on standby. They know it. I'll be ready to go if needed.
We need another 30 minutes.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for making time to be on Behind the Game.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Dave, always great to be with you, my friend.
You as well.
And
thank you, Patrick.
Thank you all for watching Behind the Game. We'll see you again next month.